The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
I'm fast. I ran a 5:40. I was happy with that.
That's good.
Well, maybe the timekeeping.
So no, I did it. I did it twice, and it was like 5:6 the first one, 5:5 the next one. Plus, we had 3 timers, and we have video evidence.
That's a question. If during that's off-season content, do we have access to a facility where we could do like?
We went into Orono Gym right as students were leaving. Nothing is weirder than being lost in a school that I never attended, nowhere near where I grew up. Being like, yeah, I know someone here. I swear to God, and we're running a 40.
You might get arrested
especially
for that.
especially when you're in your late 20s.
Yeah,
it was not great.
Not great. No, like before the draft, like if we get access to a facility to do all the like NBA combine drills,
we're thinking
as us.
No,
like,
for the SciShow, we're thinking about doing that. Like the NFL combine for us, we should be the NBA.
When are you like part of the SciShow?
I don't know. I happened into this.
Like find out what all of our verticals are from the jump test.
Mine is credit card level.
But you run a 5.5. So.
Yeah, I got speed, man. No, mine's momentum. It's like fat man momentum. I'm dead serious. I run like Wile E. Coyote for the first part. Like I'm basically just scraping the ground, and then all of a sudden it's like I lurch forward.
Abruptly, I'm much more interested in the video evidence you said there is of this.
No, there is.
I love the word lurch.
It's not great.
Lurch forward.
Are
you recording?
I am.
Yes. Okay. All of this is recorded.
We're calling this a cold open to Wolves Wired. Tom ran a 5.40 and broke into a high school, apparently.
When students are leaving, it was nothing weirder than that.
Good God.
I probably have a restraining order right now. Or
At
will
least
have one soon.
All right. Well, in the meantime, when Tom makes his way out over to prison, let's talk about some business that he managed to work together before he entered high school.
You should take this one. You set up the connection.
Okay, so a couple things. Or what do you got?
We've all partaken at this establishment.
Yes,
many times in the past.
Well, I'm going to start with another thing first that's already been on the Twitters for a little bit. If you go to zonecoverage.com on Twitter, you have the chance to come away with a pair of 8th row tickets to Timberwolves Hawks. So a good chance of watching the Wolves win. I have no wood to knock on. I'm sorry. I'll take the blame if they lose. Next Wednesday, March 28th. So all you have to do is follow Zone Coverage on Twitter. That's at Zone Coverage MN, and then retweet the tweet. It's pinned at the Zone Coverage Twitter account. So that's easy enough, right? We don't really need to go much past that. Dennis Schroeder, baby. Mike Muscala.
Muscala's from Minnesota.
He is.
He is from Minnesota. He's probably got family coming to the game.
I'm sure he does.
Maybe his family will win the tickets.
I would be really mad.
Hey, you didn't put a disclaimer that said company employees can't win, so I retweeted the tweet.
Yeah, that's true, but you follow Zone Coverage on Twitter?
I do follow Zone Coverage MN on Twitter.
Perhaps even more exciting, or at least for the 4 of us, is, and you had said that we had partaken at this particular establishment, Wolves Wired is experiencing or going through or hosting its first live show viewing party.
And Jimmy Butler will be there.
Jimmy Butler, our best friend, will definitely... He won't be there.
Yeah. He plays in the games, believe it or not. I mean...
Not right now.
I guess.
He's come to a bar in the Twin Cities to watch a game already once this month.
Yeah. He's ready, though. You said he had his jersey underneath, right?
He did. Yeah. But he probably won't be at Mackenzie Pub downtown. We'll have more details about it probably when you listen to this sometime Friday morning. But... Friday, March 30th, so just a couple days after Wolves Hawks, the Wolves will travel to Dallas to play the Mavericks, and all 4 of us, that's Dane Moore, David Naylor, and Tom Schreier, and then myself, will all be at Mackenzie Pub, along with friends of the program. Patrick Fenelon and Maggie Schultz are all going to be there to watch the game, break down the game before it happens, maybe do some trivia, maybe do some other stuff at halftime, and then break it down after the game. But we'll be there the whole game, so feel free to buy David drinks, buy me drinks, whatever you want to do.
Don't buy Tom drinks. He doesn't need the help.
Good grief. He'll start trying to run 40s on the sidewalk outside. Woo!
fall down into the second level.
and shout out to the one and only Land of 10,000 Takes podcast, which
definitely.
you should listen to. It is a much different basketball vibe than ours, but no less worthy of your listening
I
time.
was on it once, and I definitely said more swears on that one.
I was also on it once and was more drunk and said more swears than I've ever been on an episode of
It's
Wolves
a much
Wired.
drunker podcast than Wolves Wired. Well, at least this version of Wolves Wired. So, yeah, Mackenzie Pub, 918 Hennepin Avenue. It's downtown. It's by the Orpheum, and it's wonderful, and you should go there even if we're not there. But in the meantime, just keep in mind that we're going to be there next Friday.
And hopefully, going forward, this will be a consistent thing that we can do maybe for some
Playoff
road
games?
games for
Yeah.
the playoffs.
And we even said for home games, it's so close. It's by the B ramp, right? So
Yep.
we could do
exactly.
something kind of pregame and all that. So, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity.
For you Twins fans out there, I think there's a good chance some Twins events will happen this summer as well with Brandon Warren and Tom. You do Twins stuff too.
Yep, I do Twin stuff. So, yeah, and even if we're not there, you can swing by, grab a drink, enjoy
Yeah.
it. It's a great
It's
bar.
a great establishment.
It is. I think it's kind of the go-to for Wolves bloggers after games, right?
As far as I've been introduced, my first memories of coming to the Twin Cities for Timberwolves games were meeting people at Mackenzie before and after games.
When I first started writing basketball content in the Twin Cities, I met most of Wolves Twitter at Mackenzie. Fun fact.
Yeah, I have met most of Wolves Twitter at Mackenzie at various points in the past.
I've never
it's
been
where
invited.
you go.
That was the first time I went in.
We didn't know you existed back then, Dane Moore, or you. I knew, yeah.
Apparently, Twitter is important.
Who knew?
It's always great.
I always thought that you were Nikola Pekovic back in the day, and I didn't think I'd be able to swing getting you to come to a party because I thought you were
probably
at a bar, sitting behind the bench with Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you
or
might go.
Tim was too scared to approach you because you're a giant hulking
Actually,
human being.
my first long conversation with the Timberwolves player in the locker room ever was about ice fishing with Nikola Pekovic.
That's a cool story. I did not know
Yeah,
that.
fun fact. It was
One time I saw
very
him
brief.
chugging vodka out of a bottle at an establishment downtown.
He's
Sounds right.
Yep.
no wonder he was your.
That's
Twitter
very
handle.
on brand. Yeah, like
I miss him, but we're not going to get
Me
too
too.
much into him.
Dane misses him more than all of us. We know this to be true.
Yes. Tom's pickup basketball doppelganger is Miroslav Lurdulisa, and mine is Nikola Pekovic. I haven't played basketball with you guys yet, so
This needs to
determine
happen.
that.
Oh,
This needs
man.
to happen.
Boy, I was going to say, if we're talking about Tom running 40s, like the fact that the four of us haven't stepped onto a basketball court together yet is really good for me. And it will probably be
Oh, man, we
documented
should
on
do
video
that.
at some point in the future.
If we
for
all
your
manage to
viewing
make
pleasure.
our way down for summer league or something, we
Yeah.
should take on the SB Nation guys.
No, they do a media
Oh,
pickup
my
basketball
God.
game at midnight.
I played in the media pickup
Who's the
basketball
best-
game at Summer League 2015.
Who's the best player that you remember?
Adam Mares.
Adam Morris?
Brian Freeman now writes for Blazers Edge, and he's actually a pro basketball pro player overseas. And, so Adam was hurt this year, so they couldn't go one-on-one. But
Adam Mares,
I think Adam's huge.
Adam is Adam Mares. If you're not familiar, is of
Denver
Nuggets, Denver Stiffs, the SB Nation Nuggets blog. Adam, I know, played at least D2 college ball, and is a very, very large human. He has immaculate post footwork, and it is very, very fun to watch him play pickup because it's
Sounds
at a
like
way
a
higher
white blogger, dude.
Yeah, well, it's exactly like, and the most fascinating match. So this is in 2015. Was he and Trey Kirby of the Starters played against each other, directly matched up against each other, and had some really intense post battles, which was really
Trey
fun
Kirby
to watch. Trey Kirby's very good, also more than you would probably expect looking at him. But my accomplishments from that game were the fact that I guarded Howard Beck for most of the game, and did not embarrass.
What up, Beck?
I did not embarrass myself on the defensive end. The one shot that I took went over the backboard. So I did
now
not.
You embarrass yourself right now.
I'm admitting that because unlike some other bloggers whose most notorious summer league fails, looking at you, Anthony Irwin of Lakers Outsiders, who's had
definitely listening to this right now.
who had a Vine of the
Like
Euro.
one time I listened to What Was Wired. Someone rips me.
Well, I'm going to give Wolves Wired a shot. David, Dane, and Tim were cool.
I'm tweeting this Vine after this podcast because it's
Fine.
it's Anthony trying to do a Euro step, and it is affectionately referred to across SB Nation Twitter as the Euro stumble, and is really pathetic and will be on Twitter for your viewing pleasure later today.
Outstanding.
So we should play basketball, and I'll embarrass myself. It's great.
Awesome.
I think we can do that. Today on the show, we'll have Dave Benz, and we're gonna. That isn't yet. We think Dave is watching the Syracuse game currently, so he's gonna call in. Is that right?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
What is Dave's? What would you imagine Dave Benz's pickup basketball equivalent would be?
Like Wally Zerbiak.
Let's ask him.
Yeah, I think that's a question we
Probably
can ask.
like Ricky Davis.
And now calling in on Skype, Timberwolves play-by-play announcer and proud Syracuse alum, right? Dave Benz, how you doing?
I'm good. It's a little bit skewed. I'm not really a Syracuse alum. I have some Syracuse credits on my transcript, but
I see.
I didn't grow up there. I mean, sorry, I didn't go there. I grew up there.
Oh, so
but
fan.
I always tell everybody though, people that actually went to school there, they only had to do 4 years in Syracuse, and I did 24. So it was
Fair enough. Dave, we had an opening question for you. We were talking before the podcast about pickup basketball, and we just want to start with this. Who is your pickup basketball, like in NBA doppelganger?
Ooh. That's a great question I've never considered.
How have you never considered
NBA
that?
doppelganger in terms of like who would have my game?
Yeah. Whose game do you emulate the most when you play pickup basketball?
Well, when I used to play ball all the time, in my head I was Isaiah Thomas, but I was no Isaiah Thomas. So, but I had back in the day when I was growing up, and I had the Isaiah Thomas jersey, and that way the bad boys were at their height back when I probably was playing the best basketball of my non-basketball career. And and so I really loved Isaiah, but I was a marginal player at best. I was a pretty good pickup player back in the day. I could shoot pretty good, and I could handle all right. But it was limited. So it was limited to the intramurals and to the pickup games. I never had any aspirations to play at any kind of a high level in terms of organized ball.
Well, we know that you're recovering from a surgery right now that you had a couple weeks ago, but we were as we led into talking to you, we decided that at some point this summer the group of us are going to go and feature our basketball skills. So as a frequent
combine.
guest,
Do an
NBA combine.
Oh
so
my God.
so Dave, if you're
I'm
healthy,
in, man. I'm in. I will tell you though, I'm a little reluctant because the not to play ball, but I've kind of at this point skewed myself towards I'm realistic. I'm 48, and it's like a couple of years ago I got on the court with some 20-year-olds and I ended up setting a nice screen for somebody, but I had a bruised rib that kept me from sleeping comfortably for about a month afterwards. And I'm like, I don't know if I should be playing with 20-year-olds anymore.
Dave Benz, the screen setter, of course. Dave, are you you're not in New York yet, are you?
I am actually.
Oh, you
and
are?
actually,
Okay.
I'm in Syracuse right now because my folks still live here. So I flew out to Syracuse a couple days early and visit my folks. I'm actually going to take the train down from Syracuse to Manhattan tomorrow, and the train will let me off right at Penn Station, which is right below Madison Square Garden, and I'll be, set to go for the game.
Sweet. So you probably can't put it together with having the iPad up while you're doing the Wolves game. That might be a little distracting, but the Wolves are playing the Knicks as Duke is playing Syracuse. I guess just kind of to talk about this is a big weekend ahead for the Wolves. 2 road games on the East Coast starting off against a bad Eastern Conference team, which the Wolves have not had a lot of success against. I know you've kind of championed a few of those statistics over the course of the season, but how are you feeling kind of going into this weekend, first with New York and then Philadelphia on the back-to-back?
I haven't really thought too much about Philadelphia because the bottom line is if you don't take care of New York, Philly's going to be an even bigger problem. So I think the New York game, they absolutely have to have the New York game. They really would like to get the Philly game, but if you go 1-1 on this road trip, I mean, out of 10 games that remain on the schedule, I would figure that the Philly game at Denver and at the Lakers, and I don't see any reason the Timberwolves can't win any of those games, and I'd like to see them be able to win all the games they have left. But if you were going to pick out 3 games on the schedule, you say, okay, these ones could be the trouble spots. Those are going to be the 3. Philly's playing really well. Obviously, they beat the Timberwolves already back at Target Center in overtime earlier this season, although that game feels like it was 8 years ago. But right now, bottom line, worry about the Knicks because, I mean, you've already lost at Brooklyn. You've already lost at Orlando. You've already lost at my dad just walked in.
Oh, man.
Sorry, I got a little confused.
Wolves Wired exclusive.
They've lost a bunch of games they shouldn't have.
Dave, I find it interesting. I was just actually thinking about the question of what the Wolves' hardest games coming up in the last 10 are, and I find it interesting that you didn't have the matchup against the scorching hot Utah Jazz on April 1st on your list of games. Any particular reason for that?
Yeah, obviously, you could put that one on there, but that's at home, and I guess I'm kind of more worried about this team on the road. They've been so good at Target Center, unless it's the Phoenix Suns or the Houston Rockets coming into Target Center. I feel pretty good.
Man, that's a
totally equivalent teams.
Yeah,
I agree.
same team basically.
It's the neon jerseys. No. So, Dave, have you put much thought into how many wins it's going to take down this 10-game stretch to get them to the playoffs? I know you just talked about how it's one game at a time and you have to start with New York, but looking over this 10-game stretch, the schedule the Wolves have coming up versus the schedule that all the other teams that they're competing with have coming up, is there a number in your head, a number of wins they need to get over these 10 games that makes sense?
I think 5 gets them into the playoffs. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating, but I think the other teams have some really tough schedules left, and the Timberwolves schedule is a lot easier. I think 5 gets them in, probably 6 gets them in for sure. And I think if you can get 7 or 8, then maybe you could possibly, get into that 6 or 5, or maybe if everything goes right, 4 seed. I really would like to see this team go 8-2 over the final 10. Yeah, they go 8-2, they'll finish with 49 wins. It's kind of crazy. The Vegas over/under number was 48.5, which is insane that they always seem to get that stuff right. Not that anybody's paying attention to that, but the bottom line, yeah. Well, but if they could get 8 more, 49. I mean, I think that puts them in the top 6, and then you avoid Houston and Golden State in the first round, which would be a mess. But at the end of the day, hey, I think that I speak for Timberwolves fans across the board. I know that the expectations rose with the way Jimmy played and the way this team played early, but just to end the drought, man. Just get in.
Yeah.
It's nobody wants to see this team get rolled in the first round, but it's like I'd rather see this team get rolled in the first round than be back in the draft. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, they lose their pick if they get in, and you know what? It's
Hey,
like,
Dave, I wrote an article about that. I'm quite offended by your
His face is
slander.
red right now.
That's what my voice sounds like in typing.
Well, you know what? If we all had the same opinion, it wouldn't be a very good show.
Exactly. So, where was I going with this? Sorry, they have the rest of the games. I'm sorry. Can you take it, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I don't think the odds of the Wolves moving all the way up to the 4 are unlikely, like you said, and the 3 obviously seem even more unlikely than ever. No, I agree.
Take the 3 out of the equation. That's just not happening.
No, I agree, but I just want to bring up they're 2 games ahead of the 4 seed right now. Portland is, and they've been playing great. They are playing Boston and Oklahoma City over their next 2. Their schedule isn't easy, is what I'm about to say. And I'm just interested in, I guess, everybody's thoughts over how the Western Conference could play out. Like, I think people are pegging Portland as the 3rd seed, and I think that's fair because of how well they've played and how well they've kind of managed to get themselves into position. But they have Boston and OKC next. They still have the Clippers. They still have Houston. They still have San Antonio in their last 2 games. Are Denver and Utah, who are very likely, at the very least, going to be playing spoilers, more likely are going to be scraping and playing for their lives. So I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like a lot of people are pegging Portland, and I don't think it's quite set in stone yet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you mathematically, but I mean, Portland is just passing the eye test.
Totally.
Portland is clearly the third best team in the Western Conference. And I will be shocked if they don't finish with that 3 seed. So, I think you're looking at the Timberwolves they'd serve themselves really well to be 4. I'd be just as happy with 5. I mean, you lose home court if you're not 4, obviously, but you get into that 4 or 5 matchup, you're probably looking at Oklahoma City or New Orleans, possibly in that first matchup, maybe San Antonio. But I think you've got a chance against all those teams to not only win some games, but perhaps win a series. I don't know if you have a chance to win a series against Portland. You probably win some games against Portland because I think the Timberwolves at Target Center, I think they'll probably be able to hold serve. The problem is the Timberwolves are like 2-25 or 2-24 their last 26 or 27 games in Portland, and I just think that's a really tough place for this franchise to play. But hey, you definitely don't want 7 or 8. That's all I know. You don't want 7 or 8. It's better than the alternative in my mind, but just don't finish 7 or 8.
So that is what I wanted to ask you before I forgot. Is there's kind of, if they get 7 or 8, there's going to be, I mean, not just some negativity. There's going to be a lot of disappointment with this team, and kind of like you said, that 7 or 8 could be happening even if they wind up with 47 wins, which is pretty on par with what the expectations were. As you mentioned, the Vegas line of 48.5. I just kind of have found it interesting this whole season how this Wolves team has mostly exceeded expectations, and given the fact that Jimmy Butler is going to have missed somewhere around 20 games for the year, that they've stayed in line with a high 40s type win total. Can you kind of speak to what you felt with kind of some of that negative vibe of the fan base that's happened? And do you think that has to do with the play style, or is that unrealistic expectations? I mean, it has kind of been an odd sort of sentiment in what's been the Timberwolves' best season in over a decade.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they played so well so early that a lot of people were like, hey, this team really, and they were the 3rd seed in the West for a long time. And I think people were, hey, they're the 3rd seed in the West. And, and so I think expectations rose. But the reality is this is a team that won 31 games a year ago. So let's just say they finished with 47 or 48. I mean, that's a plus 16, plus 17 win improvement from a season ago. And you mentioned you lose Jimmy Butler for, just about 20 games of the season. I mean, I think you really have to take a step back and look at it and say, wow, this team has made a lot of improvement. I think some of the people that have been disgruntled, maybe the style of play has been has left a little bit to be desired in terms of, early in the year. I think it's gotten a lot better of late, but I think early in the year, even when they were winning games, it didn't look like they were having fun, and it just looked like, it was just not really that enjoyable to watch. And but of late, it really has clicked. I mean, even the loss to Houston, I felt like, okay, there's not a lot of moral victories left in this franchise's tank. I mean, they need real victories, but I felt like they had a little bit of a moral victory in coming back, making that game entertaining. I felt like, okay, you had a sellout crowd that left, and at least they didn't leave the arena feeling like, wow, this team just absolutely is no fun to watch, and what a dud of a game. I mean, people who went to that game were entertained. They were on their feet. They were into it. So, I just think the pendulum has swung, and it was so weird because there was a point in the season when, they would go win 2 or 3 in a row, and you'd feel like, wow, this team's never going to lose another game. And then they would lose 1 or 2, and you'd feel like this team's never going to win another game. And I think the fan base really reacted to that exponentially. And, I don't know why the swings seemed like they were so extreme. But I think that at this point, people now have kind of settled in. They kind of know, okay, this is a team that can win games. They're certainly not on the Rockets level. They're not on the Warriors level, but they are a legit playoff caliber team, and they have become fun to watch. I mean, if you can't enjoy watching Karl Anthony Towns do his thing, and Jeff Teague has been so much more fun, and Bielitsa has had his moments, and Andrew, I mean, the effort that he's been putting forth on both ends of the floor, this has really actually just stepped up to be a fun team to watch. And I think when they get Jimmy back in, you hope maybe the silver lining is that there might be a little bit more diversity in things down the stretch. When Jimmy was healthy at the end of games, everybody knew Jimmy was going to have the ball in his hands, and he was probably going to be the guy to take the last shot. There were a couple times he deferred and passed off, but 90% of the time it was him taking the shots. And now I think, we've seen certainly what Towns has done late in games, and, Andrew has proven himself. I think that there's probably going to be a little bit more diversity, and that's going to make things better in the long run, both as a product to watch and as well as in their ability to win games.
I think I agree with you there, and just kind of speaking to that fan base sentiment, or kind of what I've come to gather, because I found it quite jarring, those swings you talk about, both positive and negative, and I wonder if it's just that this fan base, it's so new to the fan base, and myself included. I find myself getting in that this team's never going to win again, this team's going to lose forever again, and I wonder if it's just the general new nature of playing meaningful basketball games, and we're just not kind of like conditioned to be used to this.
You said this in the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think that there's a sort of hollow confidence. I don't know if there's a better way to put that, but it's like, you're kind of, okay, things are going really well, but when's the other shoe going to drop? Because, you've been so conditioned to things aren't going to go well for a long time because this franchise, something always goes wrong. So, but then you really want to enjoy it when it's going well. So, I think it's, teams in, cities that have teams where, they're used to the teams winning. I mean, Oklahoma City, yeah, they had a new team, but they're used to the team winning, and they probably knew when they were taking their lumps early, they're going to get it right. They're going to get it right. People were not happy, but, they were like, okay, it's going to take time. It'll gel, and, Houston hasn't gone on any kind of a losing streak, but, Golden State, I don't think their fans are freaking out right now. I mean, they know everybody's hurt, but they've still got, 4 All-Stars who are going to be ready to go for the playoffs, and, one of the best coaches in the league. So I think it's just, the well is not very deep of goodwill with this team over the last decade. So it's a pretty fragile confidence, when they are doing well, just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen next.
So I'm going to toss the Derrick Rose grenade because that's not my role on the show. But I think he's so interesting because you guys talk to the players and they see him as 22-year-old Derrick Rose, right? The MVP, the All-Star. I mean, I'm sure they're aware that he's been injured.
I think it's a little bit more.
Or they revere him.
I think it's deeper than that. I think they still think he's got more in the tank than a lot of people do. Like a lot of the outsiders, I guess, do. People that don't play in the NBA.
And there was a very very vocal local crowd that was like, I'm sick of the Timberwolves. I don't want to see this guy here. Dane, you wrote about this, how his role has kind of changed off the bench, and it seemed like right when he was hitting his stride, right after this Houston game, right, he gets injured again. Mm-hmm. Through your eyes, Dave, what's going on with Rose? How do you kind of see him calling those games?
Well, here's my point on it is if the Timberwolves didn't have Jimmy Butler and they didn't have Taj Gibson and I guess to a much lesser extent Aaron Brooks, and they didn't have guys that were tied to Tibbs' era in Chicago, and they made this signing, I think that people would look at it differently. I think a lot of people are looking at it under the umbrella of Tibbs is getting the band back together, and it's and he's just going back to what he knows. And I can't say that people aren't valid. Those aren't valid thoughts, but at the same time, who knows Derrick Rose better than Tom Thibodeau? I mean, Tibbs was with him, when he had his MVP season and as he was cutting his teeth in the NBA and, when he's trying to work his way back from those injuries and he knows what that guy's makeup really is. And at the end of the day, I don't think that it's as important for Tom Thibodeau to have, the former Bulls in Minneapolis as it is for him to want to win games. And, in his impression, that is a guy that's available. And, how many times do you have a former MVP that's still 29 years old? And clearly he's not athletically the same guy that he was because of all the injuries. But how many times do you have a 29-year-old former MVP that is hungry to still prove that he's got a lot left in the tank and a lot to offer, and he certainly knows the game. And, oh, yeah, by the way, there is the fact that he's got chemistry with these guys because he's already played with these former guys in Chicago, and he's got chemistry with his coach. How many times do you have a guy like that just sitting on the waiver wire? And who were the Timberwolves going to sign and bring in and put in that open roster spot that was going to be a better fit? So, I mean, I understand why people were down on it. I understand why people, reacted the way they did. But I think a lot of people have already changed their minds in the little short time that he's been playing for the Timberwolves. I mean, he was fantastic against Houston, and he was fantastic the other night before he got hurt. And you just hope that the ankle sprain is going to be minor, and he's going to be back hopefully as soon as tomorrow night against New York, and kind of continue to be able to bring something to that second unit, because hey, it's in my mind, you got nothing to lose by bringing him in. You had the open roster spot. It's not like they cut somebody. And I feel like, it can only be a positive. It's hard to really see it being a negative. I know he came out, whatever it was, minus 16 or whatever in his first game against Golden State, on the plus minus, and everybody kind of jumped on that. But, it's a small sample size for a guy trying to prove, what he's got left against the defending champs. So I think he's acquitted himself a lot better in the last couple of games. I think he's going to win over some fans if he can, stay on the court and keep doing what he did the last couple.
Yeah, it seems like the Taj Gibson signing, we said that in the beginning of the year, if it doesn't go well, that's something that could have turned people on Tibbs really quick, right? Gorgie Jang has this good season. He gets all this money. Taj Gibson seen as maybe an older player. I know it's not equivalent, and I don't want to equivocate it,
saying.
But it seems like Tibbs, wants Tibbs guys. Like, he wants people that are sold on his program, that don't need to kind of buy in. And then it seems like once he's got his guys, like he was very loyal to Jeff Teague when Jeff Teague was coming off that injury, and it manifests itself after kind of the heat he got.
And to Rose, sorry, go ahead.
And I don't want to cut you up, but you make a great point. And I mean, in terms of Tibbs wanting Tibbs guys, it's in mid-season, that's probably what you want to do if you can, because it's tough to get guys up to speed. If you're going to make a big change, do it in the off-season. When you do bring in a Jeff Teague and somebody that hasn't worked with you, and you've got time to work with them and get them into your system. So, I just think it makes sense on a lot of levels.
And I was surprised, I think, more than anything, that at Rose's defense of his first couple of games, like even I think it was against Washington, he was guarding Bradley Beal a few possessions, and he held his own down the stretch. He's played really good defense since he got here, and he came in, like just upon talking to him or listening to him at practice, he's very confident in his game, but he didn't go out there and try to be 2011 Derrick Rose, which did impress me. But I mean, at the same time, I definitely had my reservations about the signing going in, despite. Like, I agree that, especially mid-season, it's good to have guys that have continuity with the coach and with players on the team. But the fit, I guess, was always my question and concern. Was he going to come in and try to be 2011 Derrick Rose or a version of it? Was it going to take away minutes from Tyus Jones? If it didn't, did that mean he was going to be out there with Jamal Crawford and Tyus Jones? Which, in that case, I mean, who's going to guard who on the other team in that scenario? Who's going to have the ball in their hands down the stretch? Or not down the stretch, but who's going to have the ball in their hands in those rotations? So I just had a lot of questions that I needed answered, and early on it didn't look great. But, I mean, you got to give him a break because he hasn't played basketball consistently for a long time. But yeah, the last couple games he had some spurts where he looked really good. So I'm definitely still an open book about Rose on the court. I still have questions about his fit with the team down the stretch, but I'm interested to see if they do make the playoffs, how they would plan to use him. Because generally speaking, coaches tend to shorten rotations in the playoffs. I'd be interested to see how they would handle that with the Rose signing.
I think one thing that I've seen, and Dave, you kind of pointed to the middle of this season, and it makes sense to bring in one of your guys who's really like that you're familiar with, talking about as the perspective of Tibbs. And I was kind of thinking about this before the Tuesday game against the Clippers, and specifically Doc Rivers. And obviously there was a lot going on there in Los Angeles and some headbutting going on, but one reason that team didn't ever make it to the NBA Finals or have the level of success that was hoped for was that Doc Rivers who is also the president of basketball operations, the same role as Tibbs has. Doc never insulated that core effectively with bench players. The bench was always a massive issue for the Clippers, and specifically what Doc was doing is he was bringing in former players of his, like Glenn Davis, or it was other guys who had success against him 5 years prior in when he was coaching for Boston. You think about like Jeff Green and players like that. And
Paul Pierce was a Clipper too,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And that ended up kind of being that Clippers team's undoing. And to Doc Rivers' credit, he's kind of shifted on that, and that they're no longer doing that. He's also lost the president of basketball operations role, and he's now just focusing on coaching. But now they're instead insulating their players with actual role players, a couple of G League guys. They're getting a lot of production out of their two-way players. And I wonder if what's going to be crucial for Tibbs is if he's able to kind of pivot from this just my guys thing after 1 or 2 years
to get the other guys to buy in.
Yeah, rather than waiting 5 years and having this all kind of crumble. So I just kind of find that kind of an obvious parallel because there was Doc and Tibbs coached together, and the Wolves are really kind of on the precipice of something very similar to what the Clippers were. And yeah, so I think the Tibbs Bulls guys thing is interesting, and largely the narrative around it is negative. But I think there's ways in which we can paint it as positive, so long as it's only in this current window they're in, kind of this year and next year. I think we might
about Tibbs and about with Doc Rivers, and but hey, the other thing with the Clippers though, I don't know if you can say that Clippers lost because Doc was short-sighted and only brought in guys that he knew. I mean, the Clippers never, I think, reached their potential because they genuinely did not really like each other, and there was, I can remember, Flip telling me back in the day, because he was pretty tight with Doc, that Flip confided in us that there were a lot of problems in that Clipper locker room with a lot of egos, and that they were really struggling to be able to balance it. So I don't think that's a problem at all with this Timberwolves team. I think Tibbs has done a good job of bringing in guys who are buying in and wanting to play team basketball. But he is going to have some tough decisions to make coming up. There's no question. Whether or not you will see how long Derrick Rose around. The other guy I'm really worried about when they tighten rotations in the playoffs is Bjelica, and then also with Bjelica going forward, I mean, he's going to be a restricted free agent, and somebody's going to probably throw some money at him, I would think.
Do you think, or did you have something, David?
No.
Oh, do you think, I'm thinking back to when Tyus Jones started for Jeff Teague, had a lot of success, and then went back to the bench when Teague got healthy. And Teague's been great, by the way. This isn't by any means a knock on Teague. And then Tyus Jones' minutes kind of just went back to the way they were before the injury took place. Do you see that happening with Belly, even with a lot of the success he's had, both with the starters and then also as a three, which, I mean, in theory could give him more opportunities and different types of rotations off the bench?
At the end of the day, I'd like to say that Belly has done enough to show that he should have more minutes and he should have more opportunity out there.
What, do you think it's going to happen?
But
We lost him.
oh man,
Maybe if you're listening, Dave, we lost you again. I'm Syracuse.
Yeah,
This is a computer from 2001.
I don't know where you guys lost me, but the short answer to what I was saying is I hope that there's a way to find more minutes for Bjelica, and I think he's played well enough that he deserves to get some more minutes out there, and I think he can certainly help the team win in a lot of circumstances.
It's kind of funny that the narrative, and it's probably true on both ends, but the narrative has shifted from you're going to overplay the starters, what are you going to have at the end of the season, to now we're at the end of the season and we know Tyus Jones plays better with more minutes. Bjelica plays better with more minutes. Jamal Crawford.
most players play better with more minutes.
Show me a player who doesn't play better with more minutes.
But guys who you want to be impact players in the playoffs, right, or down the stretch. And I think that's a good thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, that you have guys that are demanding minutes off the bench.
It's funny.
Yeah, well, I will say the one thing though that I think is, and I don't mean this as a knock against Tyus, because I'm a big fan of Tyus's game. But Teague the last couple of weeks has really found an extra gear, and I mean, there were people out there at one point that were saying, "Oh, maybe Tyus should start, and Teague should come off the bench," and whatever. I mean, it's I think that all of that has been clearly put to rest. Jeff Teague has found another gear, and he's been fantastic, and he's shown why he was an all-star, and why teams that he's been on have been to the playoffs every year that he's been in the league. He's been a huge part of that. So, but yeah, it's going to be tough. How do you find minutes for everybody? I mean, it's and it's clearly another guy that's suffered, and we've seen his game really go down. I mean, I don't believe that Gorgui Dieng has regressed that much as a player from what we saw the last couple of years. I mean, he played well enough to get a pretty big money contract from this team, and they gave him a 4-year commitment at that. and there was a reason for that. I don't think that Gorgie's game has suddenly regressed, but I think Gorgie has struggled in not getting, a healthy dose of minutes as well. And I just don't know how you crack that nut and how you make everybody happy.
What if you just played all the starters like 5 minutes less?
That's hilarious.
You can go ahead and bring that up to him at the next shoot around. And see how
God, I need to make sure I have my camera out for that one.
Local man dies. Timberwolves shoot around.
Honestly, though, counterpoint to the point I just made myself is that in all seriousness, like, where is this team if the starters haven't played as much, though? It probably would have cost a game or two. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to quantify exactly, but what were we talking about at the beginning when Dave got on? Is the fact that these 1 or 2 wins is going to be the difference between the playoffs or not the playoffs.
Yep.
Or for me, the kind of line I'm drawing is like the 6th seed. I'd like to see them in the 6th seed, and it's 1 or 2 games between the 8th seed and the 6th seed. And so it's, it is just kind of like quintessentially Tibbs. Obviously, like, everything they do is to win now, accumulate as many wins as possible.
Get in a playoff series, you can win.
Get in a playoff series, you can win. So I don't know. Obviously, and what we always go back to, and I need to tell myself when obviously things like this that I find don't totally make a ton of sense, that Tom Thibodeau knows a lot more than I do about basketball and certainly about all the players. But it's, again, just more overarching. And if we look at the next 3 years, who is going to want to come into Minnesota in a bench role? You're not going to get minutes.
Yeah, you bring in Jamal Crawford, and he kind of, he didn't really go ballistic or anything early in the season, but he let people know that he thought he should be playing more. So yeah, it's going to be, but at the end of the day, I don't know I think that's kind of a secondary thing. I think if there's an attractive free agent out there, and if they are able to get into the 6th seed or the 5 seed and win a series, and then, play well in a second round series, then all of a sudden you are going to be a lot more attractive to, some free agents who be like, hey, I want to go play with Cat and Jimmy and Wiggins and Teague and, and have a chance to be able to make a deep run in the playoffs. Guys want to play, but I think guys want to win even more. So, it's tough to find that balance, and that's going to be a big thing going forward. There's no question.
Dave Benz, Timberwolves play-by-play announcer, out in Syracuse, in town for Knicks Wolves tomorrow, Friday night, and then Sixers on Saturday. As always, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. All right. Well, sorry about the technical difficulties. Tom is a producer extraordinaire. He'll try to clean it up as much as he can, but you'll probably notice some of them, so apologies in advance.
Dave's calls kept on dropping for people.
Darn
because I'm going to do
Syracuse.
such a good job, you won't even notice.
Yeah, in which case you can cut this apology. So let's talk about, should we talk about this weekend, or should we talk about the last
Do we want to talk about the playoff race?
Hey, yeah, go for it.
Because that's like, you talked about Portland, and I think that I've been, like, when Portland was starting to run away with the 3, I talked to a couple people out in Blazers land, and they're like, dude, look at the last 10 games they scheduled.
Right.
Dude, look at the last 10 games they scheduled. So Boston, who's still got a lot of people hurt, in Portland. So I think that's a winnable game for Portland pretty comfortably. But then at Oklahoma City, at New Orleans.
They have 2 against Memphis, who just lost by 61
at
points.
Memphis, which is not
twice.
And then Grizzlies, and then Clippers, and then Grizzlies again.
Dallas.
And then Dallas. But then Houston, San Antonio, Denver, Utah to close the season.
Right.
So they've got games against teams that are still kind of within range of them.
Yeah.
And especially, like, if they drop that game to Oklahoma City's right back in there with them and things. The one that I think still remains the thing, and I've been saying this since the beginning of March, the San Antonio Spurs are not safe for a playoff spot in any way. They play Utah on Friday, and then Milwaukee on Sunday, and then close Washington, OKC, Houston, Clippers, Lakers, Blazers, Kings, Pelicans. There's one easy game.
But the Nuggets and Clippers suck.
The Nuggets and Clippers suck.
The Nuggets are still going to be fighting for a playoff.
I am furious at the Denver Nuggets for being as bad as they've been. They're still not out of it.
The bit around Nuggets land from a couple nights ago. It comes with the caveat that it took overtime to beat the Bulls, but it also was the game, or supposedly the game, where Paul Millsap, quote unquote, figured it out. He had 22 points on 9 shots, and after the game, he said he felt more comfortable than ever. So maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't. Denver's been really bad, but I have a feeling down the stretch they're going to be really scraping to try to get a playoff spot.
And the thing for me is that I want Denver to be eliminated from the playoff race before the Timberwolves see them with their 2 of their last 3 games in the season.
But then they're going to want to play spoiler, and that's a really popular thing.
I'd rather them wanting to play spoiler than fighting for their playoff lives against the team that might be right above them.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. I'm just saying, like, and I'm writing about it. What's that?
Is there anywhere they'll be out of it at that point? I mean, out like.
If they keep losing to tanking teams, yes.
And they barely beat Chicago. But I'm like, I don't know. I'm writing about it for tomorrow or Friday, whenever you listen to it. The Wolves can lose to bad teams because they've done that before. Like, my problem with the confidence that folks have going in, and I'm kind of throwing a wet blanket on what was mostly a successful run, death stretch, whatever you want to call it, without Jimmy Butler, is before Butler got hurt, they had lost to Phoenix, they had lost to Atlanta, they had lost to a bunch of bad teams, Orlando, and now with 10 games to go, I know that they just destroyed Sacramento and they just destroyed Chicago, and that makes you feel good. Maybe they figured it out, and they are fighting for their playoff lives, so that helps. But I don't think it's as much of a lock as maybe the national, maybe not the national narrative, but just kind of the mood is going in.
Oh, and here's my little tidbit on the Blazers specifically as it relates to the Wolves.
Yeah.
The Wolves need to win 2 of their 3 games remaining against Utah and Denver, and they will have the tiebreaker over the Blazers guaranteed. The only team the Wolves lose the tiebreaker outright to is San Antonio in the West, and the Blazers are the only one that's close. The Timberwolves win. I didn't count, but probably 90% of every 3-way tie that they could possibly be in with any combination of 2 teams. The Timberwolves win 75-80% of them already without the games played. Like, as far as if they are in the mix, if they are close, they've got numbers on everybody, including New Orleans in particular is a team that this team should finish ahead of if they're anywhere close, because that's like Timberwolves swept the New Orleans Pelicans this year. If that's a tie, everything about the New Orleans Pelicans and the Timberwolves being tied at the end of this year goes in favor of the Wolves. Every single thing.
Portland has 4 fewer wins than the Wolves, and Portland's not going to lose 4 games for the rest of the season. So
they have 7 games that aren't easy. I just.
But then the Wolves got to go. The Wolves need to win all 10.
I'm not. I'm sorry. Like, I agree with the fact. I don't think the Wolves will necessarily catch them. I'm just saying I don't think Portland is as much of a lock for the 3 as it's being kind of marketed right now. I know they've been outstanding, and they could make me look really dumb.
They would need to win. They would need to lose at least 3 games out of their last
10,
11.
Or 11
to even possibly be tied, because they have 27 losses and everyone else has. I mean, I think Portland's pretty clearly there. The other teams all have difficult schedule. I think for sure Minnesota has no shot because
at the 3 or the 4.
At the 3,
yeah, I agree with that.
Just because it's 4 losses and the Wolves. I mean, there's not very much season left, so I guess I've kind of like rolled that out, and like even 4 or 5 seems like gravy right now.
I think the key is get 5 or 6.
6. I mean, yeah.
Isn't it weird to say that, even though they're just a game behind 5 and a game and a half out of 4? I mean,
but they're the worst of all the playoffs teams. The Timberwolves are the worst of all 8 of those teams, like
including New Orleans,
without Jimmy Butler right now,
without Anthony or Boogie.
Yes.
I don't know.
Right now, if you played a 7-game series, Timberwolves versus any of those teams without Jimmy Butler,
I think
the
they
Wolves
could beat New Orleans.
Why?
Because I don't think that the Pelicans are that
I think
good.
they figured out how to beat teams with one really dominant player. Like they, with the exception of obviously Houston, who they can't really handle the peripheral players, but they've figured out how to shut down everyone but one guy. Let that one guy score. Now this tends to be at home.
I agree. New Orleans would be the closest. I do agree.
And so
with that.
you let Davis score 40, but you just don't let anyone else score. Much. Maybe you have 120 points.
Otherwise, I agree with you, though. I think they're the worst of that group. I just don't like New Orleans.
And I would only take the Spurs to beat them because of Greg Popovich juju.
And
I
Tom
think
Thibodeau juju, that is
anti that.
negative side.
Yeah, like
no,
that's the thing is like I think they should beat the Spurs in a series.
But we saw them play in San Antonio recently.
Yeah.
And it did not look good.
and it did not look good.
I have some specific Wolves related questions just for them.
That's
down
great.
the
This is a
stretch.
Timberwolves podcast. Wolves weird.
Wolves weird. I'm throwing more grenades.
Is it
And
about Derrick Rose?
I'm starting with one Rose one. We'll get it out of the way right now.
We need a Derrick Rose grenade sound effect.
We do, and I don't know why I keep on doing this, but but Dane, I want to talk to you about your piece. So basically, the crux of it, if I remember right, is that
Derrick Rose is back.
well,
just kidding.
Tibbs, right? Tibbs basically expected him to be the number one guy in the second unit, right? The primary scorer, and he moved him into a better situation. That's why he took off against Houston.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair to Tibbs, I would say maybe he was at some point. Rose had to get out there, no matter what, even if he was just going to be bad. The only shot that Rose was going to improve is he needed to shake off rust, and as it turned out, while he was shaking off rust, he was doing it in the worst possible lineup that he could. With the second, he was doing it with Tyus, Crawford, Jang, and then often Bielitsa or Gibson, and that's just not that group has. Every one of those players has clear-cut limitations, and offensively, he was putting a lot of onus on Derrick Rose. And also, what I saw happening was the guys he was playing with were also okay, none of us is, other than Jamal, is really an offensive guy. Go Derrick. And it was just a cocktail of
You need to see the
negativity.
gifts a little bit, but you kind of framed it in. Look, you can't have Rose basically doing the Crawford role, right? You need him kind of set up to either pass to someone underneath or have a direct lane to the basket.
Well, and I think that's why it got good was that he started playing with multiple starters, or even if it was one starter, that starter was Towns or that starter was Teague, and playing alongside those guys, it's completely different. He becomes a third or fourth or fifth option. I mean, situationally, Derrick Rose could be a pretty good fifth option, just on the offensive end if he's being matched up. Again, the one in the last game was Teodosic. Is
He couldn't,
yeah, Derrick Rose can get to the basket on Teodosic if Cat's out on the perimeter, DeAndre's not at the rim. So it's basically what the adjustment has been, and why I think Derrick Rose has had two great games. Rust is off, and he's been insulated by a second unit that isn't just all bench guys and one starter. And it's come together a lot better, and the Rockets and the Clippers to a lesser extent were formidable opponents for that that to happen against. So I guess for me, I was kind of in the boat whoa, this is not going well the first three games, and it could. I think we'd probably all agree there's going to be some bad Derrick Rose games, but there's going to be less of them so long as he's not out there as the number one option in the second unit.
The point to kind of go with that is, Lord knows we've seen some bad Jamal Crawford games this year.
Sure.
Dudes like this that are volume scorers, that are volume, find my shot.
It's a gamble.
It's a gamble. And, some nights Jamal scores you 17 points in the fourth quarter and you win the game when you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yep.
Some nights Derrick Rose might do the exact same thing in a different way.
And that's why I was smiling when you said,
I was wondering
you don't want Derrick Rose to be the Jamal Crawford. I was thinking you don't always want Jamal Crawford to play the Jamal Crawford.
But it's just it is weird. He picked, I forget which game this was. He literally picked the ball off the ground, hit a three, and it was that was a dumb shot, and then literally just scored 20 points after that or something like that. It's
also with the guys like that, it feels that's one of those things. I feel as someone who watches NBA games, when a guy's gonna do that. That's a thing you can almost see the flames coming off of them.
Yep.
That's Dame.
I still wonder what it's going to be like, if they make the playoffs. What the rotations are going to look like, because even for small stints, that Tyus, Rose, and Crawford unit, which he didn't use as much in the last game or two. He used Teague with Rose a lot more, and that worked a lot better, generally playing with the starters. But I assume, just based on Tibbs' history in the playoffs,
he said yesterday at practice
he's going to play the starters a ton, right? Or what?
No. In that rotations shrink in the playoffs.
Right. Exactly.
And, so he literally said as much that the rotations generally shrink in the playoffs.
Who leaves the rotation? Gorgie?
This is
Tyus?
Let's take the guessing game out. If you were in control of this, what would you do? Who do you give big minutes to? Who's your bench, and kind of how many minutes do you allot?
Gorgie doesn't play very much.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you guys individually.
I take Rose out and I minimize Gorgie's minutes.
Yeah, I minimize Gorgie. Like
Gorgie comes in if you're playing a team that has a big.
And we're making the assumption Butler's part of this.
Right. Definitely. So I take Rose out and Gorgie plays minimal minutes.
I think that
Belly plays a lot.
I would say Belly.
I'm with you on that.
Belly plays a ton in my version of this, and
Shocker.
right.
I'm not saying that's bad.
I'm playing to brand, but also
Dane's like Marcus George's Hunt starts at center.
Please.
It feels weird to say, but I'm not sure I wouldn't play Rose. Like, I think that we keep talking the Rose. At least I keep thinking the Rose Crawford thing. You try them both.
You know what?
See which one's firing.
No,
in place of Tyus Jones?
Not in place of Tyus. In that, like, back at...
No, I think you do it if you're down after the third quarter and you're just like, F it. We have to have something go.
I think it's important to remember, and I'm kind of correcting myself here a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
I'm correcting myself a little bit, but if the rotations shrink and the starters are playing a crap ton, you're probably never going to see, even if you play Rose, you're never going to see that 3-guard bench lineup.
No,
ever.
I don't think so.
One of Teague, Wiggins, or Butler are going to be on the floor at all times. So that does change it a little bit for me. But at the same time, yeah, I think I take Rose out.
So
unless he really sways me over this last stretch.
So this is what I actually wrote this earlier in the year, and it surprised me. I went through all the teams in the playoffs last year and looked at players who had gotten minutes for those teams, and it was about an average of like 10 or 11 guys per team played in the playoffs, which is counter to the narrative of rotation shrinking. So then I went kind of game by game with a lot of those, and what often ends up happening is you kind of have like 7 guys that are for sure in the rotation, and then you try and you mix in who that 8 or 9 type of guy is.
Yep.
So for me to answer your question, Tom, I would say that you have Belly, Tyus, and Jamal, who are, I would say, are locked into that.
Right.
And then, assuming the normal starters, and then that's when you start plugging in the 9 and 10 guys, and I think even George's Hunt, seriously, like, could be a situational guy that you end up plugging in. So that 9th and 10th guy that get a shot in a game would be Jang, Rose, and George's Hunt, depending on what the opponent is.
You know what's funny is if you're a fan or like a writer of a playoff team like the Warriors, and you're listening to these Wolves writers like researching what it's like to rotate players in the playoffs, like you had to like research this. That's cute.
I mean, going to your point, like when they lose to Phoenix, you'd be like, yeah, this happens. We're just not used to like thinking like, oh yeah, these good teams actually lose to bad teams sometimes. It seems to happen more with the Wolves, but
well, sure. Like I wrote that exact thing. A few months ago. And but that goes both ways. So like Denver's losing to a bunch of bad teams right now, and I still contend that they could turn it around. I don't know if they're going to. Like I think it's as likely as Portland suddenly like not being as good as they've been lately. I'll put it that way.
Sure.
But I think the Wolves are going to make the playoffs. I'll say that, but I'm not set that this 10-game stretch is as easy peasy as some are making it out to be.
Right. Well. And then also, and I think Dave was saying, or we've talked about it already on this podcast, is like, like they're not doing good against the Eastern Conference teams this year, or on the road they're 22-24. Give me a bad team every day of the week over like playing even the Nuggets or the Pelicans or some of the lesser playoff teams. It's like I mean I don't on the road whatever. It's like I want to play the Hawks because the Hawks are bad. I want to play the Grizzlies because the Grizzlies are bad. The Knicks. It's like. I don't know. I am not scared to play the Knicks tomorrow on the road because you know what? The Knicks are awful. I just watched the Knicks play today, and they don't try. And Michael Beasley is like clearly their best player, like their most impactful player, and so those should be wins. I mean, the Wolves would really need to really mess up to be losing these games. Now that can happen. Teams have games where they lapse, but when we're talking about only 10 games left in the season. They should be locked in these games, and those games should all be knocked off. A team like the Lakers, who's playing a little better on the road, now that one I could see them losing.
Yep.
The Sixers on the road on a back-to-back when Philadelphia be rested, I could see them losing that game. But really, they should be able to mow through those teams, and I don't put much credence in the fact that they lost a weird game on a Tuesday night in Orlando where Bielitsa got in a fight with Aflalo and that threw everything off.
That's not going to happen a lot?
That has no bearing on my opinion of how they're going to do against the New York Knicks tomorrow. But I don't care if it's a number in the stat.
Okay, I'll bite. I'll argue with that. It's not, to me, it's not that they lost a random game on a Tuesday where Belly put Aaron Aflalo in a headlock and made Aflalo look stupid.
Those things are all true.
All of that was true. It's that they've done that. They've lost to Memphis. They've lost to Atlanta. They've lost to Phoenix twice. So it's enough of a sample size, I think, to a point where I think you can call it a pattern. And from that, I think you can make the case that this team is just liable to lose some weird games.
More so than maybe
More
another
so than a
comparable,
team,
like a San Antonio is.
Exactly.
I do agree with that.
That's my point. So going down this stretch, I agree. And I should make the point that earlier in the season, all these teams are competing for something, including your Orlandos, your Memphis Grizzlies, your Magic, whatever. They're still playing for something. At this point, New York isn't playing for anything. Memphis, as we said, lost by 61. Atlanta's trash right now. They're not trying. Dallas is the same way. So maybe it'll be different in the sense that tanking is a more real thing now and teams aren't trying as hard. Yep. But this Timberwolves team has proven that they're not necessarily going to show up for those games. It's happened enough times where I'm just not as confident as maybe I should be.
Sure.
I'd like to just shortly, the Atlanta Hawks, who are a terrible team and one of the worst teams in the NBA, have won 7 games over current West playoff teams this year.
That's
out of 21 total, which I think is hilarious.
I think Atlanta, of those tanking teams, is the team that I'm most concerned about losing to, because when I have watched them still play, and it's on brand with Budenholzer, that team's still trying. Clearly, Memphis was down by 35 points to the Sixers early in the third quarter yesterday. And what did we just say? They
61.
They just lost by 61.
That's bad.
Losing either of those games would be unbelievable at this point. To Memphis, losing either of those Memphis games. The Atlanta one I could see happening. The Knicks, their first unit isn't that bad. I mean, you could see Cantor he's that big center on the inside
Cantor's had a lot of historical success against Towns, for whatever that's worth.
And that, we were talking about that with DeAndre Jordan, that type of player who is the bruising center who can get a lot of offensive rebounds. And another weakness we've pointed out is a playmaking 4 who can attack Belly, because Belly always guards them. I still don't agree with that. But and that's Mike Beasley, and Beasley's starting for them and playing a lot of minutes. So
Skittles,
you can, as much as you could see a way where that Knicks team or the Atlanta team would be the two most likely losses, in my opinion. The other tanking teams would just be.
Memphis would be a tragedy.
And
if they lost either Memphis game, it would be just utter travesty.
To your point from earlier, Dane, the Lakers are not a tanking team.
Nope.
Like they've been pretty good lately. They're out of the playoff picture by all means. I don't think mathematically they're up, but they've been beating some good teams, and they don't look bad right now.
As of the second, they're up 9 on the Pelicans at the end of the third quarter, which would be very useful to the Minnesota Timberwolves.
It would be.
Provided
David,
they take care of their business.
You touched on this briefly with the Utah game. And I know that's the home game, but I think that might be the hardest game.
I think it is the hardest game left on the schedule. And I got pushback on that when I said that last night.
And Philadelphia is a back-to-back, and it's on the road. So that's probably
a tough one, too.
That's probably the most likely loss. In Vegas, you'll see the Sixers be favored in that game. That Utah game, I don't know. I think if I'm putting a spread on that right now, it's like even though it's at home. I can see the Wolves aren't on a back-to-back. I'm assuming the Jazz aren't. I think that Jazz team has been unbelievable.
Yes.
And Tom, I know you're close with David Locke, and he was on the Nate Duncan's podcast today, and he was talking about the Jazz's defense and comparing it to the power of the Rockets' offense. And really the numbers bear out. And obviously some of this is a little bit of hyperbole, but he is comparing Rudy Gobert's impact on the game to James Harden. And honestly, listen to it, it's the most recent Dunked On, or maybe 2 ago, with David Locke. It's fascinating stuff and really encapsulates how dominant this Jazz team is. This isn't just like some run. They've won 22 of 24 games. and by the way, lost to the Hawks in their last game. But
I'm going to owe you a beer, aren't I?
This Jazz team is very, very good, and I think if I'm picking in that game, I would say the Jazz are more likely than not to win.
So I have a question about that exact game and the Vegas spread for that game. Mm-hmm. What would the Vegas spread change to if it's announced that Jimmy Butler's return?
I was just going to ask that question. That's a great question.
That game, because that's been. I don't remember who I saw on Twitter have a suspicion that it might be that game. I believe it's somebody talking to Lucas Seehafer.
That's exactly 6 weeks.
How many
from the surgery?
How many games have the Wolves played the Jazz with Gobert in the lineup? 1, 2?
Healthy Gobert. I mean, because they played him earlier in the year.
They played him for the home opener, right?
The home opener, he was healthy, if I recall, and then he was out for the second one.
This Rudy Gobert, the Rudy Gobert who's playing right now, is Rudy Gobert who played in that last game. That was the fight game. T got ejected. All that.
Right. Okay.
This Rudy Gobert, I mean, it is unbelievable.
It's definitely
the
a point A to
defensive
point
effect.
B, right? Yep.
They're, I mean, the unit they've been running out there has had 120 minutes over the past 10 games since they got Crowder. And their defensive rating is 76. Mm-hmm. And it's not a small sample size. It's not like, they ran them out there and tonight it was 76. It's over this extended period of time. I mean, we're talking about legit I think they're the best defense in the NBA right now. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about one of the best defenses in the past 5 years. And numbers, yeah, but you turn on a Jazz game on League Pass and watch them play for a quarter, and you're like, this is different than every other time I watch NBA basketball because people score a lot less. People stop shooting by the bucket because Rudy Gobert's there. It is fascinating to watch the Jazz play defense if you're a nerd like me.
And the Jazz, have a chance to keep pushing themselves upwards in this playoff picture too. The loss to Atlanta was bad, but they've got Dallas tomorrow, and then San Antonio, Golden State, Boston, Memphis, Minnesota, Lakers, Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, Blazers. So they got 2 games with the Warriors left, who the Warriors don't appear to be trying very hard at this point, and they're resting their guys and they're getting healthy, which nothing against that. Their hardest game left is probably that last game against Portland. Mm-hmm. And they've got a real chance to push themselves up into the 4 or the 5. And magical fantasy land, imagine Wolves Jazz as the 4-5.
That would be fun.
So fun.
It would be so much fun and so terrifying.
Let's close with let's do this one more time. There's 10 games left. They've got 41 wins. Wins and playoff seed or no playoffs. David.
49.
Okay. 8-2.
8-2.
Mm-hmm.
And 4.
Tom.
48-5.
Dane.
What did you say, David?
49 in the 4 seed. That's 8-2.
I think it'll be 47 in the 7 seed.
Okay.
It's so crazy how that margin is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It could be anything. It could be anything the week before the end
I
of the
will
season.
say, I do think it's going to be. The line I was drawing as in the playoffs is 47. I think with what we've seen from the Nuggets and the Clippers, 46 is fair. And given all the Wolves tiebreakers, I mean, they could go 5-5 down the rest of this stretch, and I think they're in with 46. 45 could even do it, given the tiebreakers.
Well, because that's the thing is the closer the large standings are, the better it is for the Wolves. Yeah. Especially because the fact that it's the first tiebreaker when you look at a multi-team tiebreak is the combined record between the teams. Mm-hmm. And with all these teams being so close, 4-0 sweep against the Pelicans, which none of the other teams have been that dominant against each other, is a huge swing in the Wolves' favor. As is
a lot of games against them early, and the Thunder.
I was going to say, as is the 3-1 against OKC. Those are both huge assets for the Wolves when it comes to if this turns into a 3 or a 4-way tie for the 4 seed.
I think it's just
the Timberwolves are the top seed in that bracket. If they're in that tie, they're the top seed when that sorts out in almost every permutation.
Wow.
Especially with Portland jumping out because Portland's one of the Wolves' worst matchups for it.
I'm interested to hear yours, Tim.
I was going to say 47-7, but you already said it. So I'm going to stick to my...
No, dude, we're come on. We are the same.
We're 7 seed guys.
I go by Dane Fakeless now. No, I'll stick with my 48 from the beginning of the year. Wolves weird. The beginning of the year, 48 wins, the 5 seed.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
No, yes.
Yeah, you did.
God damn it. 68 wins,
There's not that
1
many
seed.
options. There's not that many options.
Yeah, like
Okay,
the
47-7 is my honest assessment, but I'm gonna stick with 48 and the 5.
so Tim's not saying 51 and the 3
No.
because that's
10
that's
and 0.
the 10. That's the 10 and 0.
10 and 0.
That's
no.
10 and 0.
I don't think that would even get him the 3.
I don't think it would give him the 3 either. But there's your peak optimism point. My final closing thing. We noted the Grizzlies' 61-point loss earlier this season. I kept noticing
Earlier this day.
I kept noticing a thing when I was looking at the Western Conference playoff team schedules and the end of the year. The Grizzlies' last 10 games are Lakers, Wolves, Blazers, Jazz, Blazers, Pelicans, Kings, Pistons, Wolves, Thunder. They could just get like those 2 games against Portland.
They're like they're pulling fans from the stands. They're like, we
They just
got
lost by 61 to the Hornets.
To the Hornets, who aren't good.
They're a real bad team.
That's just really unfortunate.
Do you
for
remember
Memphis.
the beginning of the season when we looked at the end of the schedule and they're like, oh man, Utah, Denver, Lakers not good, Memphis, Denver, and now it's like, all right, Memphis twice, let's go.
Speaking of over-unders that messed it up, and one that I love this year was Memphis was 38.5. And I was like, Conley, Gasol, how's that team losing less than half their games? I was like, hit that. Nope.
Did you put money on it?
I did not. I actually didn't. I just did. I do, like, I just pick all of them and not individually.
Man, I had a final point. Then I owe you a beer. I'm pretty sure.
Well,
I'm going
the
to.
Jazz haven't made it yet.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah. Stop arguing with yourself.
We got to check.
I've done that a lot.
We can go back and check the tape to see the terms of the bet, but I'm pretty sure that the Utah Jazz indeed will make the playoffs.
And yeah, whatever.
After being 10 games under 500
I was
in January.
so confident, and then suddenly Rudy Gobert was awesome.
They've won 23 of 25 games.
Is that good?
That's really good. That's almost as
Seems
good as
good.
Houston's been.
And one of their 2s are the Hawks.
It's just like
unbelievable.
The
The
Warriors.
Hawks who swept them this year, by the way.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you have like a handful of really good teams and then like the rest of the league tanking. I mean, that's
Do you think the
part
four
of
of us plus Dave Benz could beat the Memphis Grizzlies right now?
maybe, maybe.
I mean-
If I have a 5.40.
They're not
I
playing
can do 100 push-ups in 10 minutes.
They're not playing Marc Gasol, who is our worst physical matchup, so there's a chance. Because if they were playing Marc Gasol,
Tom's guarding him.
Tom's guarding him. That's true.
He can outrun him on the fast
Dave
break.
Benz would set one hard screen on Marc Gasol.
And then the
Gasol's foot would break.
And then the Timberwolves would need a new play-by-play announcer because Dave Benz would not survive that.
All right. Go to Zone Coverage on Twitter at Zone Coverage MN to get yourself in the bidding for this ticket. I don't know what you want to call it. Giveaway thing. It's not a giveaway. You have a chance to win tickets. Go to the Twitter account. Come to Mackenzie a week from Friday, the 30th, to come see us and see the Wolves play the Mavericks. For David Naylor at Prof Cedar, Tom Schreier at T Schreier3, Dane Moore at Dane Moore NBA, I'm Tim Fakeless, TIMFAKLIS. This has been another edition of Wolves Wired. We'll see you next time.